City of Vice is a strange hybrid. It is sex and violence. It is intellectual.
Perhaps you misjudge him. His judgment is yours.
Actors of the very highest caliber.
This is the good stuff.
Dipping their toes into a world that is absolutely laden with blood and sex.
I was attracted by the fact that it's about a grungy, dirty, kind of unusual atmosphere for costume drama. It's about 18th century London, the underbelly, the downside. It's about a London before policing came in. That's what the whole story's about.
What we knew we wanted to do was an 18th century cop show. So that was the basic sort of starting point. And we knew, obviously, that who the central characters would be. That is Henry and John Fielding, who secretly founded the police, what became the police in the 1750s.
What's going on, Mr. Harris?
A dead body, it seems, sir.
Oh, wow. Excuse us, Mr. Harris.
Of course, sir.
The Bow Street Runners have their first case.
It was amazing to us to discover that Henry Fielding, who was a magistrate of Westminster in the 1750s during the biggest crime wave that London had ever experienced, had founded the Bow Street Runners 100 years before the Peelers, which we normally associate with being the original coppers. We then discovered that his brother was a magistrate at the same time, and when Henry died, he took the whole thing on for another 30 years. There was therefore a brief moment in time in which the two of them were the original coppers. It was too good an opportunity to miss.
We need order. We need the law. And finally, we can give London what it needs.
So the big story is the brothers' struggle for order in chaotic London. The smaller story in each episode, or the story that dominates each episode, is a regular police investigation. It's a murder story, or it's a robbery, or a rape, or something of that kind, which the brothers solve.
I'm told, Fielding, that my brother's murderer has yet to be dispatched to Newgate.
Alas, sir, the man is innocent.
We will find the devil who is guilty.
We could charge Flynn with blackmail.
I must have failed to make myself clear. I will have a hanging, or you will lose the funds which Parliament so foolishly entrusts to you.
Really?
I do like Henry Fielding very much. Yes, it's nice to play a part, a continuing part in a series that you can feel some identification with and sympathy for. I mean, he's by no means flawless, as I said earlier. He really is fairly flawed, and of course that makes him more interesting.
It would be my most ardent pleasure.
Well, then, it would be ours.
Do you require assistance, Mr. Fielding?
No, thank you. I am perfectly mobile.
Very well. Let's take a walk.
When he's investigating these various cases, he's more interested than your average detective would be. And he gets drawn in, perhaps, more than your average detective would be. And he sometimes sympathizes with the people that he's out to arrest. So it's a very human story. I suppose that's what I like most about him.
You remind me of my father.
The pig thief.
The man who taught me how to read. He'd be very disappointed to see me now.
Following his bad example.
My father only committed one crime in his life. I thought I might as well die for 100.
There was nothing to stop you making an honest living.
Henry was obviously a very flamboyant man, and he went through many guises through his life, and he was a hugely successful playwright and then writer, novelist, and then, led the way in the magisterial work that we got involved in. And so John, by contrast, I think is sort of is equally fascinated, admiring, frustrated, and jealous of his more flamboyant brother, I think.
Mr. Welsh, I cannot command you to do something I would not do myself.
Henry, be sensible, Henry.
There. Complete transformation.
Henry, my character, is a bit more impetuous and a bit boyish, really. He wants to rush into things and sort things out. And John's approach is more considered, quite cool and even very cold at times. But they complement each other wonderfully.
We must save that child. Henry. But who shall offend against one of these little ones? It were better for him a millstone be hanged around his neck, and he'd be drowned in the depths of the sea.
It's monstrous indeed if it inspires you to quote scripture.
It is monstrous, indeed.
But we're agreed, however, that the problem regarding Lord Newcastle requires the most urgent attention. Perhaps there's a way to satisfy both concerns. One of the attractions of the role and the challenge was portraying a blind man, which I'd never done before. And you're always looking for different aspects a new part might offer you, and that was, it was unusual. And I was helped by these. I wear these kind of milky lenses, which actually take away the majority of my vision anyway. So, kind of no acting required.
We will protect you.
I was aware that sound and smell, you put them to the fore, and they can completely affect the way you move, and obviously touch and feel becomes an important aspect as well. So actually, slightly neutral scenes on paper were always interesting for me to play, just because of the blind aspect of the role. So we'll see. I hope I'm plausible.
You will swing and spend eternity in a darkness that burns and burns. Darkness. Either way, you really have nothing to lose. Tell me where my brother is.
What we certainly wanted to do was to create an image of the 18th century which was not prettified, which is not your standard costume drama with women in long flowy frocks and tea parties, which is quite often how the 18th century is portrayed, but rather to portray it for what it was, which was a pretty miserable, horrible place.
Wanted to try and get a bit interesting texture and colours and forms into the sets, and just try to. One good example is the hallway downstairs, the Fieldings' house. It's a very grand hallway, and we wanted to make it look less grand, but we also wanted to get an element of real life into it. So we brought the builders in, and you'll notice, any paintings and things you see of London, there's especially a lot of Hogarth sketches. There's scaffolding and building work everywhere, much like London is today, because London was evolving, was constantly expanding. Episode 1 had a really theatrical look with the Temple of Venus, this sort of high-class brothel. So there's a really nice shot of a girl on a swing for a gentleman's titillation. We came up with this lovely swing with a girl sat on it in a beautiful billowing costume. It's so simple, but it works so beautifully.
We wanted to dress people as they would have been dressed. The ladies would have had chemises, corsets, stomachers, petticoats, mantuas, which is the robe that goes over the top, which is kept together with ribbons and perhaps pinned down the front. We were as accurate as we could be, but obviously there are scenes where there are prostitutes and all the gay wedding, and we could let our hair down and have fun.
If the fops of the town upbraid us for an unnatural
then we had Nigel Harman in a big sort of fantasy wedding dress. And that's what's, I suppose, been the greatest challenge and the greatest amount of fun, is to dress those people from all walks of life.
With a boy about 16.
You look like a half-wit milk sop. You look beautiful.
To highlight what it was like being gay in the 18th century, Thomas Deacon, the lover of our cop, would get sent to the gallows. I was doing a little bit of research in the British Library just to try and get my head around the period, and I read this book about London in which it described how people, you know, if you were caught and hanged, your best mates would step out the crowd and literally grab your legs and pull down so that you choked more quickly. And I just thought that was sort of summed up, if you like, the problems of life in the 18th century. That's, you know, your greatest act of mercy could be killing your best friend. There was something sort of magical in that for me.
The pleasures, I think, of this series is that because, although the individual stories are invented, all of the sort of specific detail is true. We've gone to great lengths to make it as true as we can. And so then you discover that, for instance, the temples of Venus existed. You know, we didn't make them up, they really were. And Jane Falkland really was the madam of the Temples of Venus.
My Lord Newcastle, a pleasure as always.
Madam, you must know my guests, who have most generously escorted me through these perilous streets. Mr. Henry, Mr. John Fielding.
How delightful. The magistrates of Westminster.
Madam.
Madam.
Can I offer you tea or wine?
Order a bottle of port, Fielding. They have the finest in London.
Just late arrived on a ship from Lisbon.
And so, immediately you discover my weakness.
Prostitution was very different from how we imagine it to be, and a lot of women were forced into prostitution in order to supplement their wages. So ordinary women, such as milliners, glove makers, servants, often found themselves turning tricks on the side simply to supplement a very poor income.
I think people, as is always the case when you look at a historical period, you're always astonished how close many aspects are to the present day. And you think, my God, 300, 400 years. In some areas, we haven't progressed at all. So I think there are lots of parallels for people to see. And lots of excitement, and I hope some humour too. But it's very rough, and it's very sexy. And that was the period.